Convergent clients. I am here to present with these fine folks. They're all very esteemed in their areas of the healthcare market. So I appreciate them all joining us today. Just a quick couple of housekeeping things. One, I am going for best dressed in the Convergent presenters poll, so make sure you vote for me. We have the recording that's going to happen, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. We're going to have the recording done, and we'll send that out. Questions, if you have questions, use the chat box in the side. We'll make sure that Laura gets the questions to us. She'll take good care of us and make sure that they get out to us. Bathrooms are down the hall to your right or left, depending on where you live. And if you have to go, you can go to the bathroom. And again, Laura's going to take care of all of us in the chat and make sure that everything is good. So we appreciate you joining us. I'm going to let the folks do an introduction, and we're going to go around the horn and let everybody talk and give you a little sense of their background. So we're going to start with Kat Kemper with HCA.
Hi, thanks, Bill. Kat Kemper here. And as Bill mentioned, I'm with HCA. I've been with HCA Healthcare for about 17 years now. I started my career in healthcare at a different system chains in Hawaii, and I moved to Denver to work at Rose Medical Center as the director of risk, safety, security, and emergency preparedness, and did that for a bit, and then been recently at the corporate offices overseeing the entire physical security program, which, if you're not aware, it's a $40 billion company. We own 185 plus hospitals right now, continue to acquire hospitals in 17 different states. We also are in UK, and we also have a slew of freestanding EDs, emergency department, imaging centers, and lots of other entities, about 3,000 of them. My background, I have a criminal justice and bachelor's. I have a organizational leadership master's degree, and I'm currently in my PhD program due to graduate next year with my focus on, again, organizational development and change. And my dissertation is going to be on workplace violence in healthcare. So with that, also I oversee, we have 280,000 plus employees in our company, and about 3,000 physical security guards or officers. So all of that, I basically create the strategy for the company, and I look to see how we can operationalize it and make it successful. Back to you, Bill.
Thanks, Kat. And next, let's go to Dr. Gaustine.
Great, thank you. I'm Andrew Gaustine. I'm a practicing clinician. I split my time between the ORs as an anesthesiologist and in the ICUs as an intensivist. I founded my company, which we'll talk about briefly today, which is Artisight Incorporated, to solve a lot of my own problems with my frustrations in practicing medicine. The reason I kind of continue to practice really is to remind myself why it's so difficult to practice so that my company continues to make relevant products. So as we get into this, we'll kind of touch a little bit on what my company does, but we're largely an IoT sensor provider for healthcare. We use various forms of artificial intelligence to analyze the sensor streams coming out of those devices, like computer vision to understand camera feeds, voice recognition and NLP to monitor audio streams, and active Bluetooth and passive RFID for these kind of real-time location services technologies. We bring all of these things together really to replace human senses with digital equivalents so that we can have sensors do all of the documentation and data collection inside the healthcare system, rather than forcing me, the clinician, to sit at the computer and plug information into it like a courtroom stenographer. So as we've continued to mature these technologies, we started with one solution. We now have 14 different products for healthcare, everything from the parking lot to the operating rooms, to the patient rooms, to the clinics, to try to improve efficiency to reduce operating cost and improve throughput. Thanks.
Thanks, Doc. And last but not least, we're going to let Ray give you a quick background on his past.
I'm Ray Sabolsky, and I'm one of the ex-owners of Innovative Medical Systems, which was purchased by Convergent last December. I've been involved in the medical industry since 1975. Was a relatively small regional reseller, and our mission was we were way ahead of our time with IoT 30 years ago. Our mission was to put together systems with sensors that attach to patients' black boxes, which conditions that information and then put it out on the hospital network to a storage device and a interface for the clinicians. So we started out with OB systems, and we have grown with the industry. And over the past few years, we were one of the largest infant security resellers in North America, with almost 400 systems. And over the past 5-6 years, we've been involved in real-time locating. And what we do is specialize with, I believe, taking technology and being the interface between the technology and the people who have to use it. And then we support it after the sale. So this coming December, I will be retired and I'm moving on.
And we're going to miss you, Ray. All right, let's get started with some questions. Again, this is emerging trends in healthcare. So we want to talk about the emerging trends, but to understand the emerging trends, we kind of have to understand why we're doing these things. And Kat, you've got a background in a program at HCA called Healthy Work Environment that you're in charge of, or HWE. Tell us a little bit about the environment that the healthcare clinicians are working in. We understand, those of us that work in the industry, it's completely different than any other facility or any other business that's out there. Tell us a little bit about what goes on and what the violence and the workplace violence is in the healthcare side of the world.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think we've all seen studies published by ENA or American Medical Association where they report a significant amount of workplace violence occurring in the hospital. And typically in the hospital, it's patient on colleague or clinician workforce. We've been tracking this for about a decade now, and we're able to deep dive into a lot of the data we've been collecting. And we find out about 90% or more is patient on employee workplace violence. We also can dive down into when it typically occurs. So we found that typically violence, if it's going to occur, it's typically going to occur within 30 minutes of the patient's arrival in the ED. Obviously, there's some outliers there, but we're seeing a good trend there. We also are seeing at least one violent report being reported to us at corporate on a daily basis. So knowing that we have 180 plus hospitals and we have millions of patients that we see every day, one per day is not that bad, but again, it's underreported. And we know it's underreported by going to facilities and observing in their environment what's happening and just tracking it ourselves. So it is a volatile environment. We initially expect to see violence. We don't expect, but we do see violence occurring in the emergency department as well as in behavioral health units. But what we haven't seen before and what we're starting to see now, the trends, is that violence is going up on the med-surg units or in the step-down ICUs. And the reason why is oftentimes they have a coexisting condition, a medical condition or primary condition that brings them to the hospital if it's not for altered mental status. And they may be getting treated for that. And then they have a aggressive episode that occurred during the hospitalization. or if they're wanting to leave or not wanting to leave, there could be a situation right before they're discharged. So really trying to figure out what the heart of all this is coming to and how we could prevent it from happening. And that's the heart of the healthy work environment, is having employees feel safe at work and identifying how to prevent them going forward, violent events. So initially the program started through an employee engagement survey where we received a significant amount of negative comments towards feeling safe at work. An interdisciplinary team was developed and they basically created the program for us. And it looks at 5 intents. It looks at governance and leadership, policies, education, data, and technology. And so again, we want to make it a safe environment, not only for regulatory purposes, but really it's fostering that culture of safety in the environment. And it's making it, we found that a safe and a healthy work environment, it keeps turnover rates low. It enhances the quality of care. We don't have clinicians that are wanting to stop providing care or are hesitant to provide care to that patient if they know that they're agitated or violent. And so really it is fostering that safety where other industries don't necessarily have that type of incidents. And if you look at the OSHA reports, healthcare clinicians are typically the second highest rate beyond law enforcement to have as many workplace violent events happening.
Fantastic. Thanks for that information, because I think that sets the precedence of what the things we're trying to solve going forward here. So let's throw it to Dr. Gaustine. It kind of goes right into what you started Artisight for, is solving a problem that the industry had rather than having a solution that didn't have a problem that they wanted to attach it to. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about why you started Artisight and what are some of the things that you're working on?
Yeah, when Kat was talking, it just got me thinking. I was like, oh man, she touched base on like the 7th solution that we started developing, which is something that we're about to roll out across all of Rush University Hospital, which is our kind of danger location system. So, when to back up before we get to that, what I realized going through my own training in residency was that the hardest part about everything we wanted to do, every problem we wanted to solve, was collecting data. And if you can get the data in the system, it was really easy to make an algorithm or to update people on progress, to improve throughput or improve satisfaction or communication, all of the things that adversely affect the patient reported satisfaction scores or the financial performance of the hospital. And this really hit home for me when my institution as a resident was trying to do an analysis on how quickly clinicians detected sepsis. And their solution to collecting that information was to have all of the residents pick 10 patient charts where the patients developed sepsis, and then work back through the chart and try to determine the exact point where the patient met criteria for sepsis. And there's huge gaps in the data that they had in the charts for us to try to identify this. And what I realized was that there are much better autonomous systems for tracking all of this, which kind of gets us to Kat's problem. So, Kat brought up some great statistics, but also highlighted that it's an underreported problem because people are not always going to report it. They're certainly not going to document it all the time because I have 100 things competing for my attention in the hospital. I don't always have time to document everything. And by having an ambient intelligence system that can watch for the things we want it to watch and not record the things we don't want it to see, we're able to collect much better data sets. So looking for instances using algorithms and different technologies for when a staff member might be in harm's way. Because what we're hearing about is that 90% of the problems occurred within the first 30 minutes of the ER, but it may be that we're missing 90% of the cases where this happens in other areas of the hospital. And we're kind of focused in on an area that only represents the tip of the iceberg of the problem. And so what we did was identify the problems we wanted to solve, and then backed into the technologies that would help us do that. And that's how we ended up with this passive IoT sensor technology to capture data with digital eyes and ears and kind of fingers throughout the hospital to collect the data we need to solve all of our current and future unknown problems.
Fantastic answer. Thank you. Ray, we're going to go to you next because you have a different story on this and you have a unique perspective that I want everybody to hear on how technology and people work with technology, and when you experience that in your flying days of the technology not always working the way you wanted to. So I wanted to make sure we keep this centered on not only technology, but also on people interacting with the technology. So I'm going to let you kind of take it from there.
Okay, Bill. As you know, I've been in the medical industry since 1975. The rumor that I was with Noah on the Ark is not true, but I do go back before Microsoft, before computers, before floppy disks, before cell phones. And my first engagement with computer and integrated systems was in the military, in the Navy, flying in carrier-based aircraft in Vietnam. 60s technologies put in the field in 70, designed to fly at night, 500 feet, 500 knots. Did a lot of missions in North Vietnam. And as you can imagine, the technology at that time was just starting to be developed, put in the field too early. Nothing new about that. Happens today. And basically, you could expect the systems in the aircraft probably had a mean time between failure of about an hour and a half. And after the catapult fired, you kind of pulled it, turned on everything and see what was working and what didn't work. And then you bombed off into the great beyond. And basically what we learned very quickly was you really had to maintain a situational awareness. Even though you're using technology, you had to be involved. You had to keep a dead reckoning in your head. You had to know what the altitude of the terrain was around you. You had to know how to get back to the boat, what a heading would be if the systems failed. And it came down to me, brought it home to me one night, deep in Vietnam, dark at night, 10 miles from the target. Every single electronic system in the aircraft dropped offline. Man, that cockpit was black and it was quiet. Made it to the target, dropped our bombs based, in the flashes of the anti-aircraft fire, got our back out to the boat, and basically just fixed in my mind that technology is great, but there's got to be a human interface. The humans have to be in control. Flash forward 2 years, new aircraft, new technology, worked great. We instructors, however, found a month later we were pulling circuit breakers to break it. Because when it broke, even though it happened infrequently, the students didn't know what to do. Fast forward again to the medical industry, 1975. As I watched, automated blood pressure monitors, technology, systems. What really concerned me was the fact that clinicians began to depend upon the technology. Instead of laying the hands on the patient, instead of assessing the patient, especially as the younger and younger ones came into the medical industry, they depended on the technology. When in my mind, what they should have done is assess the patient, look at the technology, and see if the technology backed up their assessment, their diagnosis. And I found this to be happening more and more as the technology gets more sophisticated, and it concerns me. I really believe, like Dr. Gaustine said, it's great if the technology can provide data real time and provide that data in a format that the end user can consume effectively. But I'm concerned that we're getting to the point where we're letting the technology make the decisions for us and not keeping the human element up front and centered. I really believe that, the technology can gather the data, can format it so it's incredibly usable in real time. But I really, really hope as we go forward that we keep the human element in it and we keep humans in control. Because I'm convinced that as computers get smarter, semi-facetiously, I think they know when we're totally dependent upon them. And they take us down the garden path. How many times have you had a presentation that goes south right when you get to the key point? How many times has it dropped off the network? And supposedly this is simple stuff. We just had a situation in a hospital where we're integrating all kinds of technology. We got it working. Butterfly effect. Someone touched a part of the system way far away and it affected what we were doing. So there are a lot of things that humans have to keep track of in this technology area. And I hope we don't lose that human input.
Fantastic, great answer. And I appreciate your side of the world on this. And that's why we have you on the panel. Kat, let's go to you again. Let's talk about some projects that you're currently working on. We know that you have a access control program that you're working and upgrading out there, but talk to us a little bit about that, on what you're doing on the Linnell side, and maybe a couple other projects that you're working on that maybe cross the boundaries of just straight security. Maybe they have an application in a different department.
Yeah, sure. Well, basically what we've looked at is that security is basically a program that assesses and mitigates the risk of other departments. And so what we're really doing is, conducting an overall assessment of all the departments and what risks they have related to security, whether it's the patient population, whether it's asset protection, medication security, or even cyber and PHI. So you have the ePHI, which is the electronic portion of it, and then you have your paper copies of the PHI that we need to secure as well. And then from a standpoint of disasters, we have hurricanes, tornadoes. How do we secure the building? We have high-risk termination sometimes. Again, if we find somebody that's been diverting medications, that might be a high-risk termination because they might get aggressive or upset. And then we have individuals that travel. With 280,000 employees. They tend to go to conferences quite a bit. And so we're looking there. Some of the technologies that we're using to mitigate all of those areas do include access control, as you mentioned, cameras, duress, or panic alarms. We also have infant security systems or patient security systems. We are mining through social media apps. We are looking at cyber security and how people are logging in. Similar to medication diversion, we're looking at access levels and how people are logging in. Are they similar patterns? Are they outliers? And those outliers, are they sending alerts? So we have a bunch of technology in our facilities. What we found is the standalone facilities, they're pretty much fending for themselves with the information. It's very challenging for them to benchmark with others to determine if there is an outlier. And so over the past 10 years, we've been installing technologies. And we've been, for the most part, standardizing down to 1 or 2 solutions. Well, what we started about 2 years ago, we started the business plan, is to now start integrating all those systems together, or really dropping down to one system so that we could use the artificial intelligence, we could use the big data to determine our business decisions going forward, and move from a passive program or a reactive program to a proactive program. So let's start predicting our data and predicting what's happening so we can step in a little bit sooner. So some of the things, we've been working with clinical operations group regarding an agitation assessment. And once an agitation assessment is complete and the score is high, these are all the controls that we put into place for the environment to keep it a safer environment. So whether we're putting on a red, yellow, green stoplight for the environment or a tag on the door, we're also then able to use access control to lock down electronically and quickly certain areas within the facility or even the entire facility. We could do that remotely as well as internally. And then again, using our employees and physicians tend to go from facility to facility. So now we could use the data that's integrated with each other so that we could see some of the trends across the enterprise. Some of the benefits that we're seeing or will see is we could check the flow of when the employees come in. We could watch their paths. We could open doors sooner or close them down to provide a safer environment. We're also able to, I know, RTLS and tagging patients, such as what we do for infant protection or pediatric protection, but we can now start going into behavioral health or geriatrics to keep our patients safe and secure. So lots of forward thinking. And right now, because we are so large, any of our projects takes years to move forward. But we are trying to move in that direction, as well as think of technology, where technology is going in the future, and how to posture ourselves well right now so that we could build and use what we have now and not have to replace in the next 5 years. So RTLS, Bluetooth, Internet of Things, cloud, those are all the things that we're looking at. And we are truly hand in hand with our cyber team, as well as our IT teams to align and parallel our projects together. And similar with our clinical operations group and HR, which direction are we all going? How do we all get there and not bump into each other with different technologies? And how do we really use these technologies to integrate and make a better, more efficient program?
That plays right into Dr. Gaustine again, I think, as he looks at some of the things. Now, again, his is probably a little bit more clinical. He does have some security things, but he's got some interesting things on the clinical side too. So let's talk about some emerging trends on your side of the world, Dr. Gaustine, and what you're doing with the
Sure.
14 different systems that you guys have built.
Sure. And even before that, I just wanted to touch on what Ray was saying, that, I hope we don't lose the human side of this. Well, like, Ray, I can tell you, we already lost that a long time ago. I can't remember the last time I actually got to sit with a patient because I had too much documentation or other nonsense to do. So whereas I guess you could see it as a potential risk to the human element, specifically in medicine, I see it as the only solution we have with the current burden of documentation and data collection that we have in the hospital. I see these technologies as the only way to put the human element back into it. And so, I mean, besides that sepsis example, the other real thing that pushed me to do this company, I actually developed a hypertonic fluid to treat cerebral edema for people that have traumatic brain injuries that actually spared their kidneys, because most of the current solutions actually harm people's kidneys and put them into renal failure. And I loved thinking about people's electrolyte imbalances, and you could gain a ton of real deep insight, but it actually takes kind of a long time to do that mental processing. But I never had time to do that. When I was at Stanford rounding on my patients, I was constantly being pulled to figure out where my patient was. Did they get their CAT scan yet? Who should we round on first? Who's the sickest? And having to do that without any information. And so what I did was try to develop these technologies so that I could actually get back to the human parts of practicing medicine and being at the patient bedside. So I could see it as both a problem and a solution, to the discussion you were leading us down. To Kat's point about just the emerging trends and the different solutions, I think one of the kind of most valuable aspects that I brought to our company was recognizing that it takes multiple years to get a solution like this deployed in a company like HCA, who we're soon going to be working with. What the benefit of my technology is that it's a platform that you put it in. It might take 2 years to get it in, like most solutions. But once it's in there, it can solve the next 12 problems you haven't even identified yet. And so if you get a solution in there that does RTLS just for infant abduction, it's going to be very difficult to try to use that for access control or workflow automation or tracking staff across different institutions. What you get with our solution is an open platform that can be used for anything that you put a tag on. It can be used clinically, it can be used for security, it can be used for tracking patients as well as tracking staff and what that means for scheduling versus staffing models. All of our tags have buttons for sending duress. We have microphones that can listen for screams. We have cameras that watch for people in threatening postures, as well as combining those technologies to try to gain other types of data that synergistically work together to predict a type of situation that could lead to staff harm. So I think if we've narrowed in on one major emerging trend, it's that yes, IoT technologies and artificial ambient intelligence systems are really a future to try to bring the human aspects back to medicine, but also doing it in a way that if we don't put in a platform that allows for technologies and solutions to be deployed much more quickly, we are never going to keep pace, at least at the pace we need to really solve healthcare problems, because it takes a long time to get solutions deployed in healthcare.
A long time, and there are a lot of standalone companies out there that are going to fight all this stuff. So that's one thing that we've dealt with for years in the healthcare market. And how do we help, again, educate the healthcare side? How do they help educate us and bringing us in to help them do an integration project? So all great stuff. Ray, let's go over to you. And again, just on your point you made with the technology and the human interaction, where would you like to see the technology and the human interaction process grow, and where would you like to see it be in 4 or 5 years?
My answer is kind of pretty simple and two-part. I'm 4 square behind the doc in terms of that's where technology belongs. Collect the data, automatically document the data, because that takes the non-medical burden. Matter of fact, one of the trade rags I was reading was that one of the big stressors is that the interface between the current EHR systems and the clinicians are still not good enough, that the systems are causing stress because it doesn't fit the way clinicians document and the way they set it up. Way back when EHR started, when the feds got money, the clinicians didn't want to be involved. And so the techies put it together, and they think differently than a clinician. So what I like about Dr. Gaustine and the people who are building these things now is that he can identify what the problem is that need to be solved, and he has a group of techies that he can beat into submission to develop the system and deliver the system to him that meets his needs. That's exactly the way it should be. And so the data is displayed to him in a format, and he can maximize the human decision-making laid on top of that data. So I'm 4 square for that. But again, remember, it's electronics, it's sensors, so you always have to be aware. Make sure your data input is good. On the back end of that, my second piece of where I would like to see things go is I would like to see clinicians in hospitals have a much, and I'm going to confine my comments to hospitals because that's where I'm familiar, is clinicians have to get involved much sooner when technology is looked at for hospitals. RFPs go out, and I look and I ask, where are the clinicians? Oh, we'll get the clinicians involved later after we decide what technology fits into our IT schema. And what happens? The technology gets there, the clinicians look at it and say, I can't use that, I'm not going to use it. There are tons of orphan RTLS systems. So I would like to see greater numbers of clinicians involved in vetting the technologies that are brought into hospitals, so that 5 years down the road, based on the fact that clinicians are running companies that develop the proper technology, clinicians who use it can be assured that it's going to meet the needs of the everyday clinician. That's how we're going to optimize this and get the benefit of it. Sounds simple, but like I say, I can't believe that clinicians are not involved in the vetting of this technology when the hospitals go out and look for what they need.
Yeah, I think clinicians, the folks that are using the systems on a day-to-day basis, whether it be facilities, the risk managers, the quality managers, all those folks need to be involved in this because they all touch a part or a piece of this. So here on trying to get everybody involved. Now trying to take a clinician or a physician specifically and say, hey, you need to carve out a couple hours of your day for the next month to work on the technology program. That's the harder thing, which I think Dr. Gaustine would say, hey, listen, I don't have enough time to do it now. So
it's like that. It's like, one, when am I going to do that? I already have 2 hours of documentation to do when I get home at night to just finish my notes from the ICU. And then two, they're only presenting me with a bunch of no good solutions. So it's like I'm choosing between two evils that I don't have anything to do with it. There's a joke at Georgetown where I went to medical school. The hospital actually got hacked and held for ransomware, and we switched back to paper charting. And all of the docs were praising the conversion back to paper charting for the efficiency it provided. So it's like, when am I going to be able to participate in, actually defining which solutions we should put in the hospital if I have to stay up till midnight every night to do that?
yeah.
Well, then if you don't participate, then you're going to have to deal with the hate and discontent afterwards. And like I say,
there's no good solution. I'm not saying we shouldn't participate. It's that it's either we can participate or we can finish using all of the systems every day that people have put in without really our insights. So it's,
maybe there needs to be a chief medical technology officer that actually is designed and dedicated to looking at the technologies as they're out there from a physician's eye. So that
exactly
we want to
exactly. That's a good first step. There needs to be someone to advocate full-time for the clinician.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Kat, let's go to you. And I think this, depending on questions, and again, Dr. Gaustine's already been nice enough to answer one of the questions out there. This may be the last question. We'll see how it goes when we come around, but I'm going to talk about pain points really quickly for you, Kat, because I know that you're pulled in a lot of different ways. There's hospitals pulling at you. There's administrators pulling at you. There's different folks that want data to prove what it is you're doing and how it's functioning. You got insurance folks that are yelling at you saying, why are you doing that? There's just lots of different ways and different pain points that are coming at you. If you could talk to the folks from Convergent on this question, and what I'm going to ask you is, what can they do to make your life or your counterparts' lives easier, and how do they bring things to the table as far as solutions for you when they're dealing with folks in your positions?
Yeah, gosh, I think there's a few, and I agree with Dr. Gosting and Ray that there's so much out there. There's so many technologies, so many companies that, they're all coming to us saying they're the best of the best. And so we're in a great opportunity where we can kind of vet them.
Oh, we may have lost Kat.
Through our systems and pilot them on short based each other. And really, I think what we're looking at doing from a corporate or enterprise standpoint is, how do we integrate these systems together, and how can we again start going down artificial intelligence? So which policies, put in some scripts, what can we do from a computer standpoint so that we don't have to manually do things? We have so many people that are doing administrative tasks where we can scan the ID badge, or we can, do the RTLS where we're walking through and we could track things, where we don't have to document anymore, and really just run the reports. We can connect the dots between access control and cameras and infant security, so that, if one triggers, it has a cause and effect situation where if we need to lock down or do what we need to do. So I think my pain point is that we have siloed technologies. They don't talk to each other. Our goal is to have an open architecture where we can standardize, we can consolidate and centralize to really move our information forward so that it's feeding information to us to allow us to make decisions, and not we're mining the data so that eventually we could make decisions. I'm looking at other industries right now to see their best practices. So for example, FedEx in deliveries, how are they delivering things? What's the process look like? And how can we tie that to our supply chain? We're looking at hotel rooms and how are they using their Bluetooth phone card keys, and how can we utilize that for visitor management, or even our employees going from room to room to room and track it. Same thing with cruise ships. They have our RFID wristbands to get into your room. So visitor management and medical alert. We've all heard the I've fallen and I can't get up commercial. Well, that could be similar to duress alarms. We know that there's tags that you could put on lanyards or on their ID badges, but oftentimes what we're seeing is employees aren't wearing their badges all the time, or they have them on the coat and the coat is on their chair, at the desk, at the nurse's station. So how can we perhaps have a tag on their wristband where, if they get in a fight or a scuffle, it's quick for them to get to their wrist, or they could smack it on an object to activate that alarm. So again, I think our focus is really on employee satisfaction, patient safety, knowing what their flow and what their day looks like, and how could we connect the dots between security, technology, and their workflow, and make it as efficient and safe as possible for them.
Super. Real quick, just if you got questions, make sure you pop them into the chat box. Dr. Gaustine, let's go to you next. And again, kind of look at what do you see over the next 3 years for Artisight? And, if you had a crystal ball, you've got a lot of different systems. I think you said it last time, how do we tie all these things together? But then do you tie to other systems that you didn't create, but you need to tie into, whether that be a cafeteria system or any other visitor management, anything like that in a healthcare environment? Where do you see your product and your company going?
Yeah, and I think that's what Kat was really touching on too, is a lot of companies will tell you, oh yeah, we integrate with a lot of things, we integrate with anything, and they don't. So what we do is we've built our platform to really be able to export or implement connections to other software systems at every layer. So, for instance, using computer vision as an example, we allow other vendors to have direct access to the video feeds, assuming the hospital wants that. Or you can have access to the algorithmic output from the algorithms watching the video feed. So at every layer down our platform, you can have access to our data that we're generating or processing with modern APIs, because it really is, you need an open system that can truly integrate with all of these other solutions, because there's going to be synergies from combining all of this data. And to Kat's point about, what do you do if someone doesn't put their badge on? That's why we didn't just do RTLS. In fact, 80% of what we do is computer vision, because you can't really forget to not wear your computer vision. The camera can always be watching. So I think in that situation, you really just got to pick the right sensor. Don't use RTLS for everything. Take a platform that has multiple different sensors, a platform that can see, can hear, and track with RTLS, and use the appropriate sensor for each problem. So where do I see us going kind of on that foundation for the next 3 years? It's continuing to refine all three technologies with this platform going into different hospitals, and we're already in 37 different hospitals systems. If we can continue to put enough of this platform into different hospitals, we're going to see hospitals defining the use cases. And that's really our kind of product development strategy, is democratize it. Let the hospitals and the end users define what this platform should be used for. We're not going to be prescriptive about it. We are going to continue to refine the technologies to make it easy for a nurse to work with to solve a problem specific to his or her clinical workflow.
There is a question, and I'm going to give this one to you, Dr. Gaustine. Do you see any changes in the pharmaceuticals being introduced to doctors via face-to-face salespeople?
I mean, even since I've been in medical school, it's been more difficult for pharmaceutical reps to come to the hospital. You know, at Georgetown, where I went for medical school, they outlawed it during my 3rd year of residency. I think just reps coming into the hospital is going to continue to be something that happens less and less every year. And that's where we've seen other companies like Outcome Health kind of switch to a digital advertising model for pharmaceutical reps in doctors' offices. So I do think that there will be less face-to-face sales from pharmaceutical reps. I don't think it's really something that my company is trying to facilitate, though.
Gotcha. Okay, Ray, let's see if we can get the last couple questions in here. You talked about this earlier, but let's go into a little more detail. On your website, it mentions that IMS works with the healthcare facilities to achieve multi-departmental buy-in. What is that, and why is that important when you're looking at a solution like this?
I think Dr. Gaustine has touched on a lot of it, and let me use an example. The weakest link in the chain, hospitals have to get more efficient, no doubt about it. For instance, everybody is involved. Let's look at a locating system. The patient comes in the front door. First thing people have to know is, they check, is your insurance good? Can you pay? After that's determined, they then go probably to pre-op. Well, in the efficient hospital of the future, like in Dr. Gaustine's system, the pre-op people need to know that that person is there, they're coming, so they can make sure the bed is available, make sure the equipment is required is available. The physicians or the clinical people who are going to treat that person in the OR need to know that the patient is there for efficiency, so they can be there on time to perform the procedure. All the supplies that are needed need to be there. Basically, after the procedure, there needs to be a bed available in post-op. There needs to be a bed available in med-surg or ICU. And then just the normal, daily activities need to be identified so that you begin to run an efficient system. So all the departments have got to be involved and working on the same system so that they can input it so their piece is done. I'm not explaining it very elegantly, but the hospital is a multifaceted operation, and all the different parts have got to be able to operate when they're supposed to operate, efficiently when they're supposed to operate, to make sure you're getting the throughput. Because as mentioned, improving efficiency 1% throughput through a hospital through the same bricks and mortar is the best way for a hospital to survive financially. And the side effect of that is patients are treated efficiently, effectively, and they're happier when they leave the hospital because they're in and they're out. It's every link in the hospital inputs that system to make it work. So everybody's got to buy in that they are going to change their flows, their workflows to meet the enterprise objective of being more efficient in supplying. Because what do the feds say right now as we move towards single payer? They want better medicine to more people at a lesser price. Okay, maybe pick two, or at least you got to get incredibly more efficient to meet that requirement. So the organism has incredibly multiple parts, and all the parts have got to be bought into the system that's going to make the whole enterprise efficient, or else it won't work.
Real quick on that, while we're talking, I was thinking about Dr. Gaustine's software package for the operating room, just the efficiency. So Doc, if you could spend maybe a minute or two on just that software program you have built in and maybe the return on investment you've seen in some of the hospitals that have implemented it?
So I mean, it's hard to separate pieces out from the platform. We always prefer, people to deploy the whole platform so that there's not a kind of a blind spot in the platform. But just generally speaking, all of our products are priced based on the ROI, and we target them all to generate a 10x return on investment. So even if it goes down to something for an individual clinic, we are going to ensure that we generate something close to that 10x return on investment. And we really do that by enhancing productivity. So, the general theme of our platform is developing technologies to improve productivity. The real value proposition that we show hospitals is that a 1% improvement in productivity is more profit than a 12% revenue gain. And if you think about that in terms of a hospital system that has 8 hospitals, it's far easier to build productivity by 1%, because that's where all the low-hanging fruit is, than to build an entirely new hospital for $500 million. And so not only is, again, all the low-hanging fruit and productivity, if you can get the right data to the right people at the right time, but it is going to be far easier and profitable for the health system to do that.
All right, Kat, I'm going to give you the last question since we're talking about data. I know in the healthy work environment, data is king. Everything in HCA, data is king, and everything drives that. So talk to us a little bit about the data that you guys collect and why is that important in your defining of where you're going to go with technologies. I know, for instance, you have high, medium, and low risk hospitals that may need different technologies depending on their risk factor. So let's talk about data for just a second and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. So we do, HCA, yes, we're a healthcare organization, but I think in the corporate world, we're also a business, and how we run that business is very data driven. So we started collecting data on workplace violence about a decade ago, and we started adding additional measures to tie into that. So we looked at theft, both internally to our patients, but also to our employees and to the company. We don't want assets going out the door. We started working on medication diversion and infant protection. And so we developed the program. Again, governance is who's in charge and how do we lead this and how do we communicate it out? It includes committees and policies. So we need the leaders to develop the policies and implement the policies. And then basically from there on out, you provide education, you educate, you train, you then also have the data to monitor whether or not you're in compliance. You can also use the data to identify new issues popping up. So over the years, over the decades, there was minimal workplace violence compared to now, where we know that there's more than just one a day, where there's typically probably a dozen a day. But how do we get that information, pulled out? And as Dr. Gaustine said, using all this technology, whether we have cameras, whether we have the duress buttons. And I think now is the time that we're using that technology to use it to data mine and how to move forward with it. And again, to do predictive or to do proactive responses. So, we've have a ton of gangs out there across the United States and other countries. And, they typically like to smash and grab in businesses where they know employees will work for a period of time, and they could go to employee vehicles, and especially physician vehicles where they know they're very nice and expensive, and they typically have other things in their vehicles. So for example, smash and grab is huge right now with COVID. People are working longer hours. They're in there for a lot longer. So, looking at what technology can help with limited resources, such as, glass breaks in parking garages. Can we do that? And similar to active shooter, those new active shooter sensors, how can we use the technology to be better informed, better aware, and start initiating other activities? So if we have a glass break in a parking garage, it automatically initiates an alert to security. Security can then pull up the alert on their phone that they're carrying around with them and have a video, and they could identify who is in that area, and they could quickly dispatch to that location if they're not already there. If we see a bunch of people running, which sometimes is not necessarily out of the ordinary within hospitals because they run to codes and whatnot, those could trigger events for us as well. So I think where we're going, I don't know, you know, technology changes so often. You can't even keep a cell phone in your pocket before it's already outdated. You know, I think everybody, Ray and Dr. Gaustine said it, you know, how do we build technologies to have us have the ability to move forward in the future and not just stuck in one place and have it useless or a paperweight going forward. Allowing facilities, you know, taking away the administrative tasks from facilities that really need to focus in on patient care and other duties, pull that up to a corporate standpoint. Our data, we collect probably, you know, 200 data points right now, real time. It feeds into a Power BI database that we can then go and pull to see where outliers are happening. We can see if people are satisfied, if they completed a survey. We could see any types of alerts and alarms, and we could compare that to see what's going on. So the data really before was going to a medical record and you know, doing case studies or having people do tick marks. Now it's fed to us and we actually have algorithms to mine it to then tell us if there's any trends or correlations. And so data is very important to us. And again, having it as real time as possible, having those connections is important, and really making good business decisions going forward that will last a long time, because again, data costs money or technology costs money. And I did see there's a question in there regarding how do you justify an ROI for AI technology in a business office. And I think Dr. Gaustine, you know, talked to it a little bit, but really, you know, how much is a life worth? If you're talking about active shooter, if you're talking about certain things, you know, a typical lawsuit, you know, I work with insurance all the time. You have both legal as well as civil claims that you can, you know, get stuck into. So how much is a ROI on a piece of technology that may cost $100,000? You have one file claimed, you know, that's already probably minimally $300,000. And then depending on all the other expenses, that could be in the millions. So your ROI is really easy to show there. If you're talking about risk-based, if you're talking about, you know, just a day over day, your units of service, it's a little bit challenging, but again, satisfaction, you have less turnover, you have less training costs, you have brand reputation of your company. There's a lot that you could play into it that you could justify the ROI, whether it's soft or hard costs.
So I think the moral of the story is let's get back to taking care of patients and let's stop the mundane collection of data. Let's let IoT devices and sensors pick up that data, alert us when there's an issue or a concern, and let's go back and work with the patients. I think all of us agree to that. So with that, I appreciate all of you guys being on here with me. We'll do it again tomorrow. So with that, we'll tell everybody goodbye and have a great day.